we want to talk more, in regular IT, when look at the SOC analyst, they have tons of data, tons of logs coming from so many places. And I can tell you from my own experience, being a SOC analyst is one of my hardest jobs I ever had. I don't know if you have worked on the graveyard shift, rotating 24/7 hour shift, and when an incident happens, you see the alert, but if you don't have access to all the logs, our investigations are limited. I can only see what I see. We did have a really great say, we are as good as our tool, right? So if you give me enough logs, if you give me data, if you give me the tools, the visibility, I can do great investigation. I can identify what happened. I can tell you when, where, and what will happen, and how can we defend against that. I can tell the incident response team, hey, this machine is compromised, it came from this network, it expanded, it moved to another network, we need to work to get this contaminated as soon as possible. So this is just for IT personnel. Could you imagine when you add the OT? And when we add an OT, it's not just an OT network. It's not what network, right? You have many technologies in the OT side. You have many different networks. We think of OT, okay, it's just manufacturing. Well, if you're a big factory, you still have power and utilities, right? Network. You have your BMS systems. And if you're in a nuclear station, you still have the water utility included as well. So there's so many different networks that comes to the SOC. So I feel sorry for the SOC analysts these days if they have to deal with all of that. So before we go to the next topic, there's something I always like to start with, especially when I teach in college, when I talk to my students in their last day before graduation, and I tell them, like, hey, listen, when you go out there and you go to interview for a job, keep in mind that the interviewer or this company, they are not so much happy that they have to hire you. Why? Our job as cybersecurity professionals, we don't bring profit to the companies, do we? We are cost. So if you ever think, that's what I tell my student, when you go to the interview and you go to the company and you talk to the stakeholders, that they are very happy to see you, think twice. And if you're going to talk about how much technology you have, how much knowledge that you know, that's not what they want to hear. They having threats. They are in pain. They have to hire you. They need the skill set because they have threats, and they need you to protect them. And that's always the conversation we need to keep in mind. I'm here to help you to decrease the threats and help you to defend and decrease the risk that your organization is facing. So this is really important to keep always in mind. We do not bring profit, we are cost. And people that hire us and needs us, they need us because they need our help. So this is where organizations and the SOC Center and Incident Response and Active Defender needs help. The element of any successful security operations are business, visibility, process, people, technology, and interfaces. But in reality, there are three major processes we need to focus on. It's people, technology, process. Without these three elements all together, we won't have a strong or efficient incident response. So I don't know if how many of you were good at chemistry. I was not. I didn't like it. And here we are. So this is the regular elements of IT SecOps, right? And if you don't like chemistry, I'm sorry to tell you, it's worse in OT. There's more elements for SecOps in OT more than just in IT. So what do we want to do? How can we help? What kind of solution you can bring to the table or to your organization that can help efficiently increase the incident response to minimize the time from the incident until you respond and bring everything back to operation? This slide, I tell you, it's easy said than done, right? There is a happy SOC analyst there, but it's very hard to make them happy, trust me. So the main idea is just very simple. You need to have all your logs or your data, stitch them, take them to the next stage where they are analyzed. If you have a tool that's using AI to analyze that data, to look for the anomalies quickly, and instead of you having the analyst look for these anomalies themselves, you save the loss of time. That's number one. Number two, automation, meaning in the back days, the SOC analyst will be having a SIM tool, see an alert, and then they have to go every log source to do the investigation. If we automated that, meaning the SOC analyst doesn't have to open every log source themselves. Do you know how many time it takes, or just a few seconds, to find the log source, put your credential, and God forbid, if you forgot your username and passwords, that will take hours to reset, right? So if we have automated all of this process to save time to the SOC analyst or the incident response team, then it can go immediately to the investigation, and then it goes to the incident response. OK, so this is my time. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Our next stop is our panelists. We have our amazing facilitator, Dave. Dave, are you here? Come.
Coming up, guys. Does that sound okay? Good. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, Adam.
Thank you, Dave.
That was super interesting.
Thank you.
So thank you all for joining us. I'm excited to be the moderator for the first panel of the morning. It is always a challenge to have the session after the session that features robotic dogs with missile launchers. But we have some great speakers who are going to be even better than robotic dogs. To introduce myself, I, unlike everyone in the room, am not a security person. I'm a cloud person. I came from AWS, where I led product marketing for a few categories, including IoT, robotics, and quantum technologies. And one of the things that was most interesting to me when I was there, in talking to customers and listening to some of the research, was how important security was and how it was blocking so much of the innovation in IoT. So when Palo Alto Networks gave me the chance to come over and help protect critical infrastructure, I jumped at the opportunity to work with people like Adam, and people like Chris, and people like Brad, in helping to protect our critical infrastructure. So I'm excited to ask a few questions. I'm very excited that I don't have to answer any questions, because I'll just start talking about the cloud. Anyway, I'm going to let the panel introduce themselves, and we'll talk a little bit about what people are seeing in terms of the convergence of IT and OT SecOps today. Chris?
Good morning, everyone. How are you? I'm Chris Wazorowski. I work for the St. Louis City Metropolitan Sewer District. I am the SCADA and DCS and OT Cybersecurity Administrator Supervisor. I've been in the cybersecurity world for about 5 years now, dabbled in it for 10 years before that. I've also been in industrial control systems and automation for approximately 32 years.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Brad. I'm with ExxonMobil. I'm the perimeter security supervisor, and that's a fancy word for external network connections. So we certify and document anything that is coming into our network.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us today. So I'm going to start off with a really hard question. When it comes to the convergence of IT and OT with SecOps, do you agree that it's important that we do the convergence? And if it's so, what's driving that?
Yes.
I would echo that. Yes, it's very important. And in my opinion, without the IT team that I currently interface with, I would not be able to do my job. We are very fresh or new to our cybersecurity journey, and I don't have my own personal SOC. So I am dependent on the IT team to run that particular facet of our organization. We're blessed with a great IT team that's over time developed a relationship, and it's extremely important in our journey.
Yeah, to echo that, so our maturity model is more advanced. We have a global operations. We're not just worried about a city. We have critical infrastructure. So we have several silos. I think of it as like the federal government where you have local PD, you got federal, and everybody stays in their lane. So depending on where that risk falls into, it depends on what group is working at, or several groups working at, and then we hand off that information to each group. So my experience is a little bit different, but I came into it a little bit late, I guess. So I came into this in February. So a lot of everything that has been established was already established, years ago. The thing that I have noticed is that, yes, this is very important and it's fluid. A lot of stuff that we thought we understood has changed, and it can change in a moment with one breach. Everything is different now, and then we have to adapt to go, okay, how does this now fit into our model and our process, and making sure we adapt to catch it quicker in the future.
Awesome. Okay, so second question. So we're at different points in the journey of the convergence. What are the biggest challenges from where you are right now, whether it's a challenge in trying to get to the convergence or optimize the convergence that has already started to happen? What are you facing? And then we'll get into how are you addressing them?
So on my side, it's the government regulations. Critical infrastructure right now is a very big buzzword. It's not even a buzzword, right? But it's something that's very important, and we have to get the information out. So the UK has completely different regulations than, let's say, Germany or Turkey, the United States, right? So where do we fall in? If we have an incident that happens, it's like, okay, we got to gather the information quickly. I have to be able to articulate that to the government. And then sometimes it's 30 minutes, like, hey, we had a breach, and that's all you have to say. Sometimes it's like, no, we have all this information, it's been 3 hours now, and here's everything that we have. And then every 30 minutes, we have to give an update. So knowing those regulations are really hard, and keeping up to date with those. So basically, we've just adapted that, okay, whatever the earliest, if it's 30 minutes, that's our global stance. In 30 minutes, we have this information. And I'm throwing out times, right? Nothing specific, but yeah, it's been really hard from the government regulation standpoint, being able to meet that and continually adapt what we need to do to be able to meet those requirements in this ever-changing environment.
So early on in our walk, I realized that communication and collaboration were going to be keys to this, but we had relatively poor communication and relatively poor collaboration. It was IT and OT, and we were two very separate entities and had two very separate jobs. And trying to bring those together was very challenging. In order to get them together, we did several activities and found out that those were the two big real problems that we had. IT wanted stuff done specifically their way. OT said we can't do it that way because that will interrupt or interfere with our process. So finding those two issues and finding a way to mitigate them was where we had to get a little creative. At that point in time, what we did is we reached across the aisle a little bit and found the right people in IT that maybe had a little OT experience, which that situation has improved because we have hired some other people now who have a considerable amount of OT experience in the IT team, so that helps facilitate this. But from that standpoint, what we did is we scheduled mandatory meetings to discuss server scans and what our vulnerabilities were, how many level 5s, level 4s, level 3s, 2s, and 1s. And what we wanted to do is make the biggest impact that we could. In doing these meetings, we actually were able to develop a relationship between myself and one other gentleman over there in the IT department who actually, due to the way the meeting was prepared, we were able to create a relationship that's long-lasting even today. He works at a different company now, but we're still very, very, very close friends. In doing so, we would have the meeting with these scans in front of us, and we would discuss how we're going to go about mitigating the issues that we found. And from there, we would prepare what we could as far as, let's grab this low-hanging fruit. Hey, I know on all my servers, I can turn off the ciphers. I can upgrade my TLS and my SSL to the appropriate levels so that my software still functions, and that takes those vulnerabilities off the table. Seeing the improvement in the OT side on the IT side, they were very happy and had a lot of confidence in what we did. So in doing so, by having these meetings and scheduling mandatory lunches and stuff of that nature and building these relationships, it's given us direct lines on both sides. They can contact me anytime they see something that's going on, or I contact them anytime I notice something's going on. Hey, did you guys roll out a patch that I didn't know about? How did this happen? What did we do? Where do we go? How do we get this done? And the SOC is instrumental in that because they're watching my equipment so that I don't have to do it 24/7, and I actually do get to sleep every now and then. But there are a lot of times when it's a 2 o'clock in the morning phone call, I roll out of bed, I hit the computer, I look at my system, make sure everything's up and running, test things. I've got a good group of guys underneath me that help and facilitate that. So it's proved dividends to create that relationship, and that's one of my biggest recommendations is get those relationships in place.
I saw a lot of nodding heads in the audience and on stage. So, Brad, when it comes to the people.
Yes, Dave.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hi. When it comes to the people part of, we talk about people, we talk about process, we talk about technology. As you look about optimizing and improving the convergence for ExxonMobil, what do you think about when it comes to people?
From the people perspective, ExxonMobil has typically hired type A engineers. And it's been that way for a very long time. The younger generation seems to be more easygoing, amenable, and that's not a bad thing, right? And those people are key to interfacing between the type A's and the other groups that are type A's and understanding, okay, I hear what you're saying, I understand what we need to do, tell me why. Articulating that and going to the other group who probably wants their own way because they're type A and goes, no, my way is the best. Okay, I hear you, tell me why, articulates that, and then is able to go back and make that kind of a decision like, oh, this is what we're doing, and this is how we're gonna do it, right? But you need those key people. You can't have two people in there arguing because nothing comes out of it. You'll end up having 3 or 4 meetings. ExxonMobil, it's pretty much, I need to have this meeting, so I'm gonna have a pre-meeting to have that meeting. And then still nothing gets done, so then you have another pre-meeting to have a meeting. And then you finally have the meeting, and you get maybe 50% of what you needed, so then you have to have another meeting to be able to accomplish it. So you spend your time on Zoom, right? We go into the office and we sit on Zoom anyway. But unfortunately, the people aspect has been really challenging because typically we did hire the same type of people. Now I think we're really branching out and we're getting a lot of different thoughts, like you don't have to do it this way. And that has really helped streamline our IT, OT, getting all these groups to start synergizing. Because I talked earlier about the silos. And it's a really big thing. Everybody's like, no, you stay in your lane. We got this. But those groups have been going for, risk assessment's been there for what, 20 years? They have their own culture. Some of those people have been there for 20 years. No, this is what I do and this is what I only do. In fact, we had a large project going on in one of our smaller plants out in Wyoming. And we had to shut it down because there was one person that on the paper literally said, no, it does not state that I do it this way. And we lost millions of dollars because that one person would not make the change in our policy. We own the policy. It's not government regulations. This is ours. So again, it goes back to the people, right? The people point of view is you got to make sure you have the right personality in each of those groups and know that everybody can interact. Because in a larger company, it's more political than it is actually trying to get anything done at the end of the day. It's how do I get my agenda done and look good, right?
Thank you.
No problem. To clarify, I do look good. Thank you.
As you were listening, I was thinking about the number of times that I've put together briefings to get ready for the pre-meeting, for the meeting, and the action items coming out of the meeting.
Yeah. I got a lot of footnotes. Yeah, I got to make sure I talk about this, right? And then I try to put it in the Zoom meeting so everybody knows what we're talking about, and we still don't get through half. What's this meeting about? It's like, bro, like it comes up on your Outlook. Just look at it.
It sounds like some folks in the audience have had this experience as well.
Yeah, it does sound that way. Yes.
Anyone? Yes? Okay. Okay, so Brad, you get another question now. So I'll read it. So at ExxonMobil, tell us a little bit about how you do incident response in a converged SecDev operations environment for a third party or supply chain risk. Incident, sorry.
Yeah, so in ExxonMobil, with everything being so siloed, everybody does know their lane, and we do it very well. So when we hear or we see on the news, we also have a group that's dedicated to threat intel. So they're on forums. They're listening to what the hackers are going to be targeting, or, hey, we're going after critical infrastructure, and this is their name. We then go, okay, what's this group? How do they normally attack infrastructure? And then with our dedicated team that we have, I spoke about this a little bit yesterday, where we have dedicated teams that do the L4 and the L3. We'll come back and go, okay, let's take a look at everything that we have. What could be an area that's a vulnerability? And then how do we get in front of that? So that group that does the intel then passes it off to us. We go and look at, okay, what do we have for the IT and what do we have for the OT? And how are we going to be able to understand that quickly? So usually it's a swarming method where we get everybody together. We have to summarize everything. So we take a lot of our ENC process or external network processes. We have a network NAD. We got a whole bunch of information. We got all the technical details, what firewalls, PLCs. We have the configurations able to pull up on all of our connections. So then we go in and we'll actually sit down and we'll summarize it down even more into basically a PowerPoint, and then we hand it off to the next team. And then they follow that in a similar process. They have a dedicated team. They have their information. They get the summary in, and then it goes to the next team. So we ended up just passing everything along with everything that we've had, but don't think that it's something that we can just do quickly, right? We've been data mining for a very long time at ExxonMobil, and our data is almost more important than our hardware that actually does it. So we keep this and we have it meticulous and we have everything organized so we can quickly, we even put little numbers on everything so we can follow where the network flow is going to go. So at ExxonMobil, that's typically how it goes. We have smaller swarms that tackle each individual part and we pass it on to the next. If we were a smaller organization, I assume every person would get in the room and you're all looking at your piece and then throwing that information out and getting that information out as fast as you can.
Thank you.
No problem.
That was super interesting.
That was a great question.
Thank you. We worked hard on that question. We're going to bring this back to Adam and then to Chris. One of the most interesting things going on in the industry today, of course, is AI and automation. When you think about the convergence of IT, OT, and operations, what's the low-hanging fruit? What are the trends? What do you think is coming in terms of automation?
So, from my experience when I was working in the SOC, and I always feel like it was one of my painful experiences working in a SOC. But one thing that I found it was really helpful, and I work a lot close with the team, with the engineering team, with the threat hunters and the content engineers, is can you help me to make my job easier? I need to automate this process. I don't want to go manually looking for every log, right? Can you help me just close these false positive alerts? Like there is tons, like there was a point in my time or my shift, 95% of my time was false positive alerts. And that makes me, when really incident happen, when really people needs me, I am exhausted, right? And by default, and I have seen this a lot, by default, because our brain, this is how our brain function, It's based on the last experience we have. So if I have been closing false positive, false positive, false positive, when a true positive comes, it may be very hard for me to see it. And this is when really incident or important and huge impact can happen. So if you can help me to automate these process to close as much as you can from the false positive standpoint, that would be great. So that was one important component for the automation, right? The second part, when we think about the threats, right? I'm looking from the content engineer and the threat hunter standpoint now, right? I did work with the threat hunting team, and this was a great experience. And from our standpoint, we learn about these recent threats, and we want to be proactively building those baselines to detect and find these anomalies. So having some tools that, like ADRs, that can actually go on this huge amount of logs using AI to look for these anomalies and report it to me, that saved me a lot of times. I cannot tell you, like, if you go in the SOC and ask any analyst, what's the strongest alert, or which alert that makes you feel like it has a high confidence there's something bad happens, they usually say something like an EDR that's using AI to do the analysis. Because when it comes to us, we know there has been a lots of processing before this alert was fired, right? And that gives us more confidence. When I see an alert comes from an EDR or any tool that does machine learning and AI, I take it more carefully. I look at it with more cautious. So having these two components, having the automation that help the process, saving a lots of time, and having the AI that help us to increase our confidence that this alert is true positive, these two components helps us a lot in our incident response.
Great. Chris.
Yeah, so in our processes every day, I didn't really pinpoint in on it, but the advent of this AI and the engines and the processing, the stuff that it can do, we do a lot of data analytics. We do a lot of digital twinning and stuff of that nature. And when we do these things, there's AI engines running all over those things. And you may not even know it, but you may have engineering teams that are utilizing these technologies, and it's out there. So being a small team at the district, we are a little resistant to new technology because it's one more thing that we've got to learn. It's one more thing we've got to take care of. It's one more thing that's, going to be a headache for us. But what we found is that if we embrace it versus meeting it with more challenge and trying to resist it, it gets us a lot farther, a lot faster. It gets, it's one of those things you just have to get used to it a little bit. Once you've gotten used to it, then you can relish it and you can actually use the power that's encapsulated within it. So where do I see it coming in? I can see it in all facets of the OT world, but especially in threat analysis inside of our equipment for our cybersecurity journey.
And Brad, Exxon has a lot of data. Where do you guys see AI going?
Yeah, so AI, for us, I think we were some of the early adapters. Mostly for the automation standpoint of we have a lot of things going on the rig. We need that information to be brought into the corporate office or wherever, the district office or globally or in real time. So we ended up having to develop not the AI aspect of it, but the API to be able to interface with the thousands. We got 15,000 sensors out on some rigs or more. So those sensors, sometimes we don't use. It's kind of like your phone. We have a whole bunch of sensors on it that you don't use, and there's some sensors that you do use. Same thing out in the rig. We want to be able to get that information out quickly. And we don't want to have a person sitting there and typing in all the information when we could have AI be able to grab that data, be able to throw it to a dashboard or pass it on or fill out a PDF and then mail it. So one of the other aspects we saw too early on when I first started was we had 68 rigs at one point in the Permian. Those 68 rigs every morning had all the engineers come and sit down, and we would print out all the information that we needed every morning. Same process every day. So that's the integration where it's like, well, why are we doing this? And of course, this was 10-something years ago, right? But well, why are we doing this? We don't have to do this. We got screens everywhere. We could automate this. We could have all these reports generated and set up for you first thing in the morning. So from the AI standpoint for us, we've been using it and adapting it as much as we can in our process to be able to free up the human side of it to where, hey, now that you don't have to do this, what are some higher actions that you could do? If we're out in the field, for example, we have the company man on site, what can they do for them safety perspective? Are they able to catch something before it happens now because they're not in the office typing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? I don't know, right? But we don't know because we can't do that because we have somebody tied to the computer when we do have AI that actually could fill in a lot of those gaps. And now that we're seeing it inside of the security standpoint from IT to OT, we're, again, are able to go, hey, this is just a false negative. We don't really care about this. But if this comes through, this is high priority, please let us know, right? And we're able to, again, we don't have people shifting through the data. We have the AI able to alert us, and we can instantly react as needed.
Great. Okay. Last question before we break. So if you think about this audience, everyone is at some different point in their journey to this convergence for SecOps. If you look back at what you've learned through the research early in the journey, further along in the journey, what are the one or two things that you would recommend people think about or do to take their next step on the journey?
So when we did the research, I worked with a really great team, and each one was contributing to be creative. How can we find threats in the OT environment? And we wanted to start first looking around the network perimeters. If we take one step back, the first thing that we saw that makes us alert or wanted to dig deep in our threat research, that the top industry were impacted by ransomwares were the manufacturing industry. That was the first obvious threats that we see and that we need to dig deep in these threats and see what are additional vulnerabilities, attack surface out there. And then after we find these threats, we want to talk about how we can be proactively defending against them. Again, in the triangle, the architecture passive, and then the active defense. So in the active defense, when it comes to SecOps, the few things that I have experienced that I see even in the incident response team that can be really alerting and concerning. One, when an alert comes to the analyst, they may have access to tools from IT and access to tools for OT. Do you know how many times the analyst will just open the IT and does not touch any OT tools? I have seen this happen numerous of times. The OT tool, like a SIM OT tool, the analyst did not touch it for months. And companies will pay $1,000 or $100,000 to get these tools, and they don't use it, right? So that's an additional component that we want to think about, like the knowledge and the technology and the people expertise that they need to do so. The second experience, which I have seen, which is more interesting, you have the personnel who have the knowledge about the IT and the OT. And then the leaders come and tell this personnel, do not touch the OT tools. You know why? Because that leader doesn't know what to do if there is an incident came from the OT. There's no process, right? They don't know how they can handle that. The analysts have the knowledge, they can do investigation, but the leader doesn't know what to do after that. And they were not encouraged to use the OT. So as next steps, I really encourage people to look at the SecOps as integrating IT and OT SecOps together. If you're planning an incident response tabletop topic, bring both IT and OT on the table. Make sure their needs to have an effective incident response are met for both of them. Don't just meet with one team and avoid the different team. I know Bradley was talking about meetings and and I am one of the people who I don't like attend a lots of meetings, but that specific meeting I would attend. It's very important to have both IT and OT come together, learn about their needs, and make them met so they can have an efficient incident response.
Great. Chris.
Yeah, I think if I were going to give any advice, it's communicate frequently, communicate often, and communicate well. It's really just another personality on the other side of the table, and as long as you can figure out a way to communicate with those people, you can get a lot of things done. It's very difficult at times, but it's a matter of, administering a little grace, giving a little leeway, and being willing to compromise. And then that's the second part, is compromise, collaboration. Work together. There's instrumental people on both sides of the table, very, very talented individuals. If you reach across and utilize the tools that you've got, plus the extraneous tools from outside, whether it's vendor support or a friend that's in the industry, somebody that you met at this conference, those are great places to start the collaboration and take all that information in to help you build your journey.
Brad?
Dave, yes. So, in my experience so far, it's been inaction. We end up seeing there's an issue, whether it's a process we need to change or there's a threat, and we actually are hesitant on doing that. And often, that is worse than actually making a decision of, hey, go ahead and just pull this connection, and we'll just isolate this, and it's now standalone until we figure out what's going on. So, in my experience, it's been the inaction has actually been worse than making a decision either way, and then standing by it, whatever that decision was.
So if I was listening to everyone correctly, make sure you get everyone at the table, communicate clearly with them, and make a decision.
Yeah, you didn't hear anything I said. It's all about type A, and it's my way or no way. No, I'm just kidding. No, you summarized it very well.
Awesome. All right, so we've got 1 minute left, so we'll just take, do we have time for questions? I think we have time for one question.
Okay, so Mr. Robbie, I'll make this one quick. You mentioned for Industry 4 and IT convergence that architecture is going to be critical for OT cybersec. Aside from the log shipping you mentioned, how else do you see the architecture dramatically changing, especially in regards to zero trust and segmentation in and around cloud connectivity for cyber physical systems?
So on the architecture level, yes, it's really important to look at convergence in the architecture level where we talk about, again, network segmentation, how you share the knowledge of the architecture of both teams, right? Like from the IT and the OT perspective. I have worked in both industries. I have worked in OT and I have worked in IT. And one thing I have seen in the OT, for instance, when I work very closely with the automation engineer, and I love this environment, that's my background, electrical engineer, talking about IP address, and they will come like, I don't know details, I just need an IP address, put it on this device to work, right? So sharing that knowledge of the architecture, it really helps to avoid a lots of issues and increase the efficiency, especially when it comes to incident response. Both teams have great knowledge about the architecture, and that will help to have a great incident response in an efficient time.
Great, and with that, thank you very much. Thank you to our panelists, and we'll give you to the next session.